jump right in and do a little Hill House story. I'm getting lost in time because this all happened so long ago. It's kind of hard to keep it in a forward progression of time. So I'm trying my best, but I am gonna have to jump around a little bit because memory is a weird thing. But after we moved in and we finally got settled and we got into our new house, my friends started coming over to spend the night. Now, my friend whose father attacked me only came over to my house to stay the night one time. And she didn't stay the entire night. By about midnight, she had seen too much in the house and was just crying, curled up in my bed, screaming for her parents to come and get her. I don't remember what she saw, but I can assume it was probably the man in the bowler hat in the hallway, or the creeper on the stairs, or the kids in the bathroom. You know, there's many things she could have seen. So her parents came and picked her up, and she didn't finish out the night. My sister Kat came over to spend the night many times. She can tell you about her experiences staying there, but she was the bravest. She always stayed the entire night, no matter how scared she was, so that was nice. And I made a friend who lived up the street. I could run to her house whenever things got too bad at Hell House, and she would spend the night every now and then, but I typically went to her house so that I could avoid Hell House. My aunt, who grew up in Hell House, would visit in the summers, and she would get a hotel. She would leave Hell House once the blue hour or right after sunset hit, and she and her husband absolutely refused to stay in Hell House after dark. They were terrified of the place, and she didn't want to experience anything else. So it was pretty hard to get visitors to stay in Hell House with us. It was not a very common thing. I've been avoiding this because it's time for Hell House to start getting evil. The spirits I've told you about so far in the house were ordinary, every day. They just were there. But after we really moved in and we started getting comfortable in the house, and I had already been attacked. It was right around the time that I'd been attacked, actually. So right after we had really transitioned into 100% living there. A couple of my friends had already stayed. It was starting to feel like our house. We started to notice something new happening that none of our family members had ever told us about in the past. So we were not prepared for this. I remember the first time that this started, I was sitting in the living room with my mother watching TV. I do not remember what we were watching. My brother was in his bedroom, and my dad was sitting out on the front porch smoking a cigarette. And as we were watching TV, me and my mom started hearing what sounded almost like distant Jumanji drums. And it started getting louder and louder, because at first we thought it was in the show, but it got so loud that we paused our television, and the drumming didn't stop. So we looked at each other and made sure that, yes, we were both hearing that, and we sat and listened as these drums got louder and louder and louder, and it sounded almost like it was coming louder in there because I had kind of a feeling that I knew where this was coming from. And sure enough, from the basement, it was just so loud. It was coming from up those basement stairs. And it was loud enough that I remember it hurt my ears. And my brother came running out of his bedroom, scared, wondering what that sound was. So my mom gathered us all up and went outside. We ran outside onto the driveway. My dad was sitting out there smoking his little cigarette. And once we got outside, it stopped. There was no drums. With as loud as those drums had been inside the house, we should have been hearing it outside, like really loudly. I remember this started at the blue hour, which is right after sunset. My dad was really confused as to why we were all scared. He hadn't heard anything. So he made us go back inside, and it was complete silence. There were no drums. But that night was really bad, and I'll tell you about that in the next story, because the drums seemed to have woken something up in the house that had been dormant. Sure enough, from the basement,
I just woke up, so don't mind the bad hair. So they were basically like war drums, really, because like Anna said, whenever they started afterwards, a bunch of other strange and unpleasant things would happen, both including, like creatures that weren't usually there starting to wander about, and other abnormal activity that wasn't as regular basis. And also a lot of the times, everyone in the house would get super cranky and start fighting and shit after the drums. So it was kind of a warning system, really. But, it was still terrifying because your basement shouldn't be drumming like that. Sometimes when I'd be down in the basement on the computer or something like that, you'd start hearing what you'd think at first is, like the washing machine filled with stuff banging on the walls. And then it'd start getting louder, and you'd be able to hear the actual rhythm of the drums. And that's usually when I would go upstairs for a little short dinner time and wait for it to go away. Because I usually wasn't downstairs save for when it was daytime and nighttime. Evening time, I don't remember being down there ever at evening time.
So that night, the vibe of the house changed drastically. Now, I know I've told you guys that the house felt oppressive and that the house felt dark. But after the drums in the deep sounded for the first time, that night, the house didn't just feel dark or oppressive. It literally felt like walking through another place, as if those drums had woken up some deep corner of the house that spread out everywhere and took over everything else that we had become familiar with. The air itself felt like walking through dreams, trying to move through jello, and I immediately just went to my bedroom. I wasn't about to stay out in the living room because the living room made me feel very vulnerable. It had this big front window that the darkness could press in on, and the couch was pushed up against the window, so you had to have your back against that, and you could always see the hallway or the kitchen, so I just felt very watched. So I went to my bedroom, and I couldn't feel Radio Ghost, my friend, who kept my room feeling safe. And I didn't see the man in the bowler hat, really. I could feel him, but I couldn't really see him. There was something else there, taking form in front of everything else. So I laid in my bed and waited for 1:20 a.m. for the red lights to start. And I remember that night the red lights were so bright that they were glittering off the hall walls. And I always tried to stay awake until after the lights stopped glittering, because I felt like everything terrible that would happen in the house was going to happen while those lights were on, almost as if they were kind of a warning or a siren. But that night, I conked out right as I saw those lights glittering on the walls, and I had the most horrible nightmares. Terrible, terrible nightmares that I don't remember, but I woke up screaming in the morning, and the house still felt weirdly blue and dark. And we noticed that there were things in our living room that were moved all around, like pictures and stuff, and hadn't been put back right. After the night that the drums in the deep sounded, I got strep throat so bad. It was one of the worst strep throats I've ever had, and I do get it quite frequently, especially when I was younger, but it was awful. I was bedridden for like a week, and I remember I needed to take a shower one of those nights. So I hobbled into the bathroom, and I got undressed and got into the shower. Now, something you need to understand is I love to sing in the shower. I used to sing opera, and I was in all of the the choirs that actually did competitions and stuff in my high school. I used to be able to shatter glass, stuff like that. So I would sing in the shower. But I couldn't sing that night because my throat was just so sore. And I was sitting in the shower, like actually sitting, letting the water hit me, and I heard a little girl's voice very plainly say, "Why aren't you singing?" So I just said, "I'm sorry, kids. I can't sing tonight. I know you like it, but I am too sick." So the water pounded for a little while, and the night I started hearing two children's voices singing one of the opera songs that I loved to sing in the shower. And it was so sweet. Like, I'm sure these children were a demon, because, demons like to show up as children to put you at ease, and they certainly had this way about keeping you in the bathroom with them. But the fact that they showed me such raw kindness to sing my favorite songs to me when I was deathly sick and could not sing for them, I wept in that shower so hard. I actually have a hard time showering now because I've had so many traumatic experiences in the shower that it's difficult. But that was just one of the sweetest things that those children ever did for me, was when I was so sick, they sang to me instead. And it still makes me gestemmt thinking about it. Hey Gina, I really wanted to thank you for this comment that you left me a little while ago. I have previously responded to it already, but I wanted to do an update for you. Your comment spurred me to look into the further history of the house, or rather the land that I had only really known anything about it from the 1950s on, from when the actual building company came in. and some of the things that I learned from some of the headstones in the graveyards there. But me and my brother went on a research spree to look into the actual history of the land there prior to the 1950s, and oh my god, I found so much, and I'm sitting on it so hard, but I want to tell you guys because there's so much that I have found. And I guess there's one thing that I could share is we found a pattern, a approximately 10-year reoccurring pattern in that area where every 10 years since I believe it was the 1600s, there has been something horrible that happens in that area. And it turns out we are in one of those 10-year wake-up periods right fucking now. So it actually makes sense that I've been inspired to talk about Hell House and why you guys are all having Hell House-like experiences on your own just by being exposed to these stories, is because we're in a 10-year cycle. So that's very interesting, and I am going to be paying attention to see how long the house and the area stays awake in these cycles. So we also found a bunch of different museums that we need to visit that might have information on the history of the area. So that will be happening soon. We found out the identity of the white thing, the woman in white that crouches on my brother. So we're finally going to be doing some things to remind her that she's dead and get her off my brother. There's a lot of things happening with Hell House right now. Some of them I really can't tell you because it'll immediately reveal where Hell House is, but I'll do my best to give you the information without turning it into an Amityville specter, because people do still live there and they don't know I'm doing this. Oh, sweetheart, I haven't gotten there in the story, but it was not just our house. I hadn't figured that out in time yet, but once we get there, the other houses are fucked up too, I promise. That's a very good question. The only thing I can really tell you is it's all I really knew. That house was supposed to have spirits. That house was in my family before I was even born, and there was never a time that I knew that house without spirits and without people being afraid of it and telling stories about it. So when my parents told me that we were moving in, the first thing I had to think about was the fact that that house was incredibly haunted and filled with more ghosts than people would ever be in there. So I guess I just came to accept it over a lifetime of experience. And when you're a child, you don't really question things as much. It was just normal. And I didn't have a choice on where I lived. It wasn't like I could have done anything differently. So how I did it was I made friends with one of the spirits in the house that had the ability to keep the nastier ones out of my bedroom. I drew a lot of artwork to try to keep my mind focused on something positive. I made a friend up the street that I could run to whenever things got too terrible. I had a meditation space at the end of the dead end that I would go to if the house itself was too bad. I had to read books and watch TV if I needed to not focus on the spirits. But typically I just kind of walked around and, you hear the kids in the bathtub. You're like, hey, kids. You see the guy in the hallway and you're like, fuck off. You need to get something from the kitchen, you sneak in there, look at the kitchen door, run and grab what you need, and you start hearing the creeper crawling up the stairs, so you run back to your room and close the door. It became normal. That was just my house. So,